An earmark is how politicians fund their pet projects, including some that reward their pet donors. In this year's spending bills alone, Congress has inserted 12,881 earmarks worth over $18 billion. That brought some tough talk from President Bush in his recent State of the Union message.
If you send me an appropriations bill that does not cut the number and cost of earmarks in half, I'll send it back to you with my veto.
But the president's heavy artillery was loaded with blanks. Just a few days later, it was learned that Mr. Bush has packed the proposed new budget with thousands of his own earmarks, including over $6 million for research in Vice President Cheney's home state of Wyoming on the fundamental properties of asphalt. I didn't make that up.
Reporters David Heath and Hal Burnton have come to a tiny Washington town in pursuit of a big story. Heath and Burnton are here in Bremerton, following a money trail, chasing down what are known as earmarks, the federal dollars that members of Congress slip into spending bills, often at the last minute, usually to benefit individuals, companies, or institutions in their state or district.
If you're an elected official and you are making decisions, you should be able to justify what you're doing. It's not supposed to be corrupt. It's not supposed to be about cronyism. It's not supposed to be about favoritism. So I came at this story with a certain naivete, a certain belief that the world is supposed to make sense.
In the fall of 2006, the world wasn't making sense for David Heath.
I was watching a documentary called Why We Fight.
Is felt in every city, every state house.
Eisenhower is giving his farewell address to the nation.
We recognize the imperative need for this.
And he's warning the nation about this new military-industrial complex.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
But every year, private interests donate millions of dollars to congressional campaigns, and Congress doles out tens of billions in earmarks. And it's all business as usual.
Sometimes you have scandals where you have a congressman taking bribes, and you think, okay, well, that was a bad actor. The question is that all there is, or is this something bigger that's going on? Is there something wrong with the whole culture?
To try to answer that question, Heath would ultimately have to leave the comfortable terrain of the state of Washington for the backroom dealings of that other Washington. But first, he would do some reporting with his computer. A specialist in data analysis, he decided to home in on Congress's 2007 defense spending bill, all $400 billion of it. His plan seemed simple. He'd create a database jammed with everything he could find on the bill's earmarks. He just needed to get the list of them. But there was no list to be found.
They're literally hidden. I mean, they're not in the bill. They're not in the defense bill. And I finally had to call an expert, a guy named Winslow Wheeler, and ask him, where are these earmarks anyway? How do you find them?
Few understand earmarks better than Winslow Wheeler. The former Capitol Hill staffer spent more than 30 years serving powerful senators from both parties, often helping to craft earmarks for his bosses.
If you look at a Department of Defense appropriations bill, you'll not find very much pork in it. What you need to do is look at the committee report. 99% of the pork is in the committee report, not in the statute.
That is the conference committee report. Before a bill is passed, both houses meet in conference. It's there that they hammer out all their differences, and they finalize their earmarks. When Heath found the 2007 Defense Appropriations Conference Committee report online, he struck gold. 2,700 earmarks, worth nearly $12 billion. Now it was simply a matter of transferring the earmarks into his own database. He'd get some assistance from 2 college interns. In fact, deciphering Congress's earmarks proved nearly impossible.
They'd actually taken simple text and then they shrunk it down, tiny little type. There's 535 members of Congress. And I had to go through their individual websites and basically spend all that time hunting through their websites for that press release about their earmarks.
It took Heath and his team months of full-time work, but in the end, they had produced an unprecedented database containing a list of all the earmarks in the defense bill, the congressional sponsors, and the private sector recipients. They also added information on 6 years' worth of campaign contributions made by those earmark recipients, plus data on the millions they spent lobbying Congress.
For lobbying expenses, they'd spent in 2006 alone, 1 year, $160 million lobbying Congress. Big money. But they got $12 billion in earmarks.
But unless a bribe can be proven, earmarks aren't illegal. And for all David Heath knew, they might well be critical to the nation's defense.
The earmarks that I ended up picking, it was almost like throwing darts. The first one I started off with was with a company called Microvision.
Seattle's Microvision Corporation produced a high-tech device called the Nomad. The helmet-mounted computer display hangs in front of a soldier's eye and projects battlefield maps onto his field of vision. The Nomad, Heath learned, was earmarked again and again. 2001, $8 million to develop the device. Among the sponsors, Washington Republican Senator Slade Gorton. 2 years later, after being defeated for re-election, Gorton joined the Microvision board. 2004, $5.5 million to buy Nomads. The sponsor, Washington Senator Patty Murray, a Democrat. When Heath cross-checked that earmark with campaign contributions to Murray, he found this.
Microvision executives had all in one day given Patty Murray a large donation. And then a month later, Senator Murray announced that she was getting an earmark for the company.
And the senator wasn't done earmarking the Microvision device. In 2005, there was another $6 million for more Nomads, nearly 1,600 of them. Heath had followed the money, but now it was time to talk to those who would use the Nomad, Stryker Brigade soldiers stationed at a local base. His editor, Jim Neff, called in some backup from the paper's specialist in military affairs, Hal Burnton.
And Hal knew people at the base. He had reported on the Stryker Brigade. He had been embedded with them in Iraq. So what better reporter in the country, actually in the world, to have investigate the Nomad than Hal Burton?
I really approached it with a pretty open mind. If they were using it and it was working, fine, I would tell David that.
But they were not using the Nomad in combat. The Army had concluded it was distracting to wear and caused a blind spot. One Iraq vet, retired Command Sergeant Major Thomas Adams, put it bluntly.
He said, "It's junk."
He actually told Dave and I at one point that most of them had just ended up in a warehouse.
I was shocked. I mean, it was like, I have to admit, not only was I shocked, but there was also kind of this rush that you get when you're an investigative reporter and you realize, oh my God, can you believe this? I mean, they're selling a product to the military that they're not even using.
And there was more. The reporters found a press release from defense contractor Rockwell Collins. The company was trumpeting a contract it had gotten for its own helmet-mounted display. The Rockwell Collins device had beaten out rivals in an Army-staged evaluation. Among the defeated, Microvision's Nomad. Heath was keeping a running timeline. He entered the date of the Rockwell Collins announcement. Something jumped off the screen.
Rockwell Collins makes this announcement that they won the contract on a particular day. And the next day, Patty Murray announces that she's getting a huge earmark for this Nomad being produced by Microvision.
It was that $6 million earmark, the Times would report, for almost 1,600 Nomads.
When I saw that Senator Murray awarded an earmark after the Nomad had lost this competition, I wondered, did she know that? Was she aware of it? If she wasn't aware of it, it seemed like she should have been. if she was aware of it, why would she do it?